In this presentation, we're going to continue on with the vendor section, this time entering a payable payment. So a payable payment meaning we entered a bill in a prior presentation increasing the accounts payable. We're now going to be paying off the bill with a payable payment. Let's zero in on it with Xero. Here we are in our Xero Demo Company dashboard. We're going to be opening up our reports first. So we're going to go to the accounting dropdown. We're going to be opening up the balance sheet report. And once that opens, I'm going to right click on the tab up top and duplicate that tab. Go back to the tab to the left. We're going to do the same for our income statement, hitting the accounting dropdown, going down to the income statement. And then we're going to go back up to that tab up top and right click on that tab. As it generates the income statement, I'll wait just a second so it generates it. And then I'll duplicate it. So there we have that. So there's our two. Now you'll recall last time I'm going to go back over to the balance sheet that we entered a bill and what the bill did. And before we think about what the bill did, let's go ahead and change the date up top and bring this out to 2020. Let's say May 31st. And then I'm going to update. And then we'll consider what the bill did, which was to debit or increase the expense, lowering the net income. The other side going to a payable, which is going to be here in accounts payable. So we're going to open up the accounts payable. Then if we scroll down and we look for that, there it is. Here's the invoice for misspelled Verizon telephone company. So I made it misspelled just so it pops out at you more because that's just the, So here's the $50 here. So now we're going to pay that off. Now, if we look at this in terms of the flow chart, let's look at QuickBooks Desktop flow chart. What typically happens just in terms of the flow here, we got the vendor section. We're going to enter the bills. And then, of course, we're going to pay the bills. Now, as you enter the bills, it's going to increase the accounts payable. And it's going to be increasing the other side, which in our case is an expense, which would lower the net income at the point in time you put the bill in. Then you can kind of think about sorting the bills and thinking about which bills you want to pay and then pay them either electronically or whatnot, or you can pay them by check and actually use the checks in order to enter that into the system. So we'll think about those methods of now paying the bills. So I'm going to minimize this. Let's go back to Xero. I'm going to go back up to our balance sheet. We're then going to go to the first tab. So we're in the first tab. Let's go back over to the dashboard. So we're in the dashboard in Xero. Then I'm going to go down to the bills you need to pay. So we're going to go down in the bills you need to pay section. It's going to be similar to as we saw for the accounts receivable section. We want the available awaiting payments. These are the amounts awaiting payments. So now you can go in here and you can kind of sort this out and think about the amounts that are awaiting payment. Here are the amounts due. You could sort these by various columns if you so choose. And it's typically the default to be sorting it by the date column, but you might want to sort it by the amount, or you might want to sort it by the vendor. So you can choose those items and then think about which of these you would like to pay. Now I'm going to be paying the Verizon at this time. So there's a couple ways we can do this. We could check these off. We can check these off and make the payment, or I'm going to go first into Verizon. So if I go into Verizon here and I'll look at the actual bill, so we'll be in Verizon. And just like you saw with the invoice side of things down here, if we're going to make a payment, here's the bill up top. We can enter the payment amount down below. So I could say the payment's going to be down here, and I'm going to say that this is going to happen, let's say in May 6th. I don't know why. And then we're going to go, it's going to be paid from the checking account. This is going to go out of the checking account. Now, if it was just an electronic transfer that you're basically putting into the system at this point in time, you can leave it there. If you're actually writing checks, you will have physical checks that you'll still need to get from the bank and put them into a physical printer because they're going to have pre-numbered check numbers on it. That's an internal control. And if you're going to print the checks, then you can go to the pay by check, right? We're going to go to pay by check and then add the payment. Notice here that the check number is going to generate automatically. That's the check number in the system, and Xero system will calculate automatically. That's what it should do, and it should be matching the check numbers that you have on the physical checks. So I'm going to go ahead and save this for now. So let's save this. Now, the other thing we could do is if I wanted to hit a couple of these at the same time, like say I wanted to do this one and this one and, this one and pay those items, then I can go back up here and I can say make payment in kind of a batch type of format. So you can see obviously we have the three items selected. I'm going to go ahead and make payment. And then I'm going to go ahead and say here I want to pay by check. So I'm going to select the pay by check, and then once again it's going to basically apply the check numbers to those payments. I'm then going to select the proper account, which is going to be the checking account. So we're going to select the checking account here. Here's our checks. Again, assigned the check number. So if you wanted to print those out, you'd have the preset check numbers that you'd be putting that into the system. I'm going to go ahead and save this at this time. So I'm going to go ahead and save those items. Then, of course, if we had the amounts waiting payment and then we paid them, they should be going over to the paid section. So then if we were to select the paid section, we're going to see some of those items that will now be appearing in for the Verizon, for example, that have now come over to the paid section as if now they have been paid. So note the transaction here that happened for the Verizon, which was in the payable here. These are in the payable sections, decrease in the payable, and the other side, decrease in the checking account. Now to actually print the checks then, you're going to go to the business tab up top. You're going to go to the checks down at the bottom, and then you'll have a list of your checks. So here are the actual checks, and you can print them from this section. So if I can check these off, so we can check off the checks here. And then we're going to print to the PDF here. I'm going to print to the PDF. We have 3 checks that are selected, and that'll make basically a PDF format of it. So I'm going to open up that PDF format, and here's what we have. Now note, then you'd want to take the pre-printed checks or the pre-formatted checks and put them into the printer. You want to test out the printer to make sure that you line everything up correctly, know which is the top and the bottom and the front and the back and how something prints on it. You might want to take a blank sheet of paper if you're printing the checks. Mark on the top, mark on the bottom. This is the top, this is the bottom, this is the front, this is the back. Put it into the printer and see how the printer prints the checks out. You'll note that here we don't have the check number here. All we have are the amount and the information of the check. That's the internal control, right? Because there should only be one check that lines up to the check number, and the check number should be in order. So then, and obviously if we go back here, we do have the check numbers here. Those are the check numbers that are in the system, which should tie out to the actual physical checks that are outside that you're going to be printing onto. That's why you want to make sure it lines up, because if it gets messed up, then of course you kind of have to void the checks and print them again with a new check to indicate the fact that that check is now crossed out. You have a checkbook check that's no longer good. So to avoid that problem, you want to get everything lined up on your printer as best you can. And then you'll have to avoid less checks to actually practice on checks, practice on blank pieces of paper until you get the system right. And then once it's all set up fine, then you should be good to go, and you can basically just print these out from this screen. So then what's the effect on the financial statements? I go back over to the balance sheet then. If I go to the balance sheet and we update the balance sheet, we can then go back into the accounts payable down here. I had the hiccups for a second there, but I'm back now. And then down in the accounts payable, you're going to go down and we should have the payment. So notice what it calls it, like what Xero calls it. We have the payable invoice here, which is basically a bill. I don't know why they wouldn't just call it a bill, but the payable invoice. And then we have the payable payment, which is the bill payment. We paid off the bill payment or payable payment. All right, and so this is going to be going down. Then we have the debits and credits. And again, you can kind of see what the debits and credits are doing here. Unlike like QuickBooks tries to kind of remove the debits and credits and only use plus and minus in here, I kind of like seeing the debits and credits because you can see the running balance and you can kind of figure out, you know, what the debits and credits actually are, because that's really the kind of thing that's driving this. So you'll note here that obviously that the credit is increasing the balance because the liability is going up with a credit, and then we debited it when we paid the bill, when we wrote the check, and that's going to be decreasing the amount here. So that brought it back down. So now the accounts payable is going down by that $50 payment. The other side, let's go back to our balance sheet, is going to be obviously coming out of the checking account because we wrote a check in order to pay off the payable. So that's going to be in the checking account, which would be a cash account, except that we're overdrawn down here, and therefore it's down here in the liability section. So here's the checking account in the liability section for that reason. And then if we scroll down, we should have our payment. There's our payment for the $50, and that's a credit. You'll see it's in the credit column. It's a payment. Again, you can see it's on the payment side. You can see the description. It's going to be decreasing the running balance here.